we're going to start doing a series of videos on trimming. So this is going to be trimming the lid of a teapot. So I have a body of a teapot here. I have thrown a lid using my measurements, and I am going to trim it on the teapot. So I had cut the body off, but I never moved it, and so it does kind of stick itself back down enough for me to do this, but it makes it easier for me to cut it off later. So my top is pretty leather hard. It's still got some ways to dry. It's still a little bit softer than the lid is. So there's a little bit of extra room here that will start to shrink in. And I want some extra room anyway because I'm going to glaze in here and I want some space. So I'm gonna intend to fire this separately and have glaze, which is going to add a thickness. So I'm compensating for that. And you can see there's a little bit of a gap here, but again, some of that will close in with shrinkage, some of it will be from glaze. So I'm on a bat. This body is still attached to the bat, so I don't have to worry about centering because it's already centered, which is a really nice feature of something being on a bat still. Same thing when you go to rework a piece. Say you want to open it up further, having it still attached to the bat means you don't have to do all that work in recentering. I could choose to wad down the lid. I'm going to see how it goes by just having it sit there. If I feel like it's moving around too much, I'll wad it down with some clay. What I am going to do first though is I'm going to put some little slips of paper under here to make sure that my lid doesn't stick down when I do this. It'll stick down some, but what I don't want is it to be impossible to get it off. So I'm just tearing the paper a little bit so it'll seat well and let the piece go in there. Okay. So there's my lid. Obviously when I cut it off, you can see when I cut off the hump, it's a little uneven, so I'll have to deal with that as I start here. So I'm going to turn this on. Oh, maybe I left it on. Should always turn off your wheel. All right, so the first thing I want to do is level out that surface so that I can get a good start on my trimming. So in order to do that, I'm going to take my pin tool, if I can find it here. I'm collecting quite a number of tools. And I want to push my pin tool through this below the lowest point at the top. I'm not sure if you can see it here. And start to gently push through. I may need to wad it down to do this. I think I will. I don't want to use a lot of clay. I don't want to cram it in the hole there, but I want to have enough to hold it on. So I'm going to hold this in place and sort of push that in. Same thing here. Hold this in place, push that in. And we'll try that again. So I'm just slowly, gently pushing the pin tool through. And I'm getting, there we go. It's getting decently deep, and I could have a choice of cutting through all the way like I did, or then taking a wire tool when the wheel was stopped and doing it there. Now I've got a pretty smooth lid here, a pretty smooth, consistent surface that I can start to trim. And I'm just going to make a nice smooth dome, and then I'm going to attach a handle to that. So I'm probably going to get rid of these pieces now, because I should be able to just hold it on with my hand. So when your piece is dry enough to trim, it should come off in ribbons like this. If it's too dry, you're going to dull out your tool, and you're also going to just make a horrible screeching sound. You won't get very far. It just doesn't want to quite stick down. I may need to take one of the pieces of paper out, but we'll see. I'll apply a little bit more pressure right at the center. Don't want to have to wad it because it gets in the way. Maybe I can use very small wads. Alright, let's try that with very small wads on there. And so I'm just going to make a nice slightly domed lid. The inside of my lid is not very cupped, so I don't want to leave a ton of clay because then my lid will be an inconsistent thickness. So it's going to be mainly flat with a little bit of a curve to work with the curve of the body. Looking pretty good. I'm going to take away just a little bit more because I know how thick that lid was when I started. Just like when you're trimming smaller things, make sure you feel the thickness before you put it down so you know how much you have to work with. Let's see if I can take these lugs off so I can trim the last of this piece. Hold it down. Well, at least I know I'll be able to get the lid out of here since it doesn't want to stick down. So I've got that trimmed. I'll have to do a little cleanup on the edges. You can kind of see on the edges of the lid once it comes off of here. But I'm going to make a little mark to see exactly where, make sure this is on center, because I'm going to attach some clay to be a handle. Looks like I'm just slightly off center. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to take a small piece of clay and I'm going to slip and score that onto the top of this. and then do a little throwing to make it into a handle. Let's see, how much? Yeah, maybe a little bit less than that. I'm gonna make this as cylindrical as possible so it's not a pain to center it, and then we're gonna slip and score this on. I'm going to pick this up so I can make sure that this knob gets good and attached. And you can kind of see the edges of this are a little bit jagged, so while I have it up, I'm going to just smooth that out, and I'll do this again once it's finished being trimmed, just to clean everything up. But I'll get rid of some of those edges right now. And I'm going to turn my wheel on and do just a little bit of shaping. I was a little impatient. My scoring didn't quite stick. So I'm just applying minimal pressure here. I want to make sure that's nice and attached. You can use a different tool. I have to find the right tool so I can get into that crevice and really clean that up. I'll do a little coil around this just for security's sake. And slip and score a little coil of clay into here. There we go. So I could go ahead and have already had shaped the exact handle, the exact little pole that I would want on this. You could be a little sculpture. It could be a piece that you threw off the hump when you were throwing all your other components. You could score on a piece like I just did and then shape it once it's attached. There's really no limit to how you can do this. You're just trying to make something that you can hold on to. And that works with your piece visually. Alright, well, I'm pretty happy with that. I've got a little simple little knob, and I've got my lid, and I can go back and clean up. I'll have to clean up this edge of the teapot anyway, because I'm going to have to turn it over onto that edge to let it dry, so it's going to get a little flattened. So I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. I'm going to turn off my wheel, and then I'll go ahead and cut this off again and then take the lid out, and I'll show you that, and turn it over to dry. I need to cut this off a second time now that I'm done trimming my lid. And clean off the stuff from my hands. And so I've got my piece, and I can get my lid out. So there's my lid, trimmed up, ready to go. And here is my body of my piece that now I need to let this dry at the bottom so I can trim it. And I'll have another video of trimming this body with a jig, because I won't be able to easily set this down on the wheel head to wad it up. So I'll make another video about that. I just wanted to make a quick addition to the video that you just watched of trimming this lid for a teapot. I did a horrible thing, and I didn't compress my lid after I trimmed it. You should always, 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 and you know this from Ceramics 1, always compress anything that you trim. It is much more likely to crack, to get an S-crack in this lid, because I didn't compress it before I went to add my knob onto it. So that is super, super important. Always compress anything that you trim. Go back with the rib, take some time, compress it, and you'll have way less cracks in it. You also might see that I have a small vent hole that I punctured into the lid for steam to come through, that I'll clean up when I assemble it. But I wanted to point that out to you because I forgot to do that, and it's really, really important.